Today, I'd like to continue our discussion of the book Undoing the Knots by Maureen O'Connell. This book, which takes a look at racism within ourselves, within our church, within our community. We're up to, in our discussion, part 19, which starts with chapter 7, called Homesteading. And the parish that Maureen is relating to at this point is St. Francis of Assisi, the parish of her grandfather. And it was a time of building and building in the suburbs, and the grandfather was very much involved in that, was a great builder. It was the time of better homes in America, the time of Herbert Hoover trying to revitalize America. The interesting thing that Maureen found in this suburban parish, St. Francis of Assisi, and going back through the records, something that her grandparents and other relatives did not share with her, was that there was a blackface minstrel show to raise money. So here you have this all-white parish in the suburbs. How are they raising money? How are they raising funds? They're putting on this minstrel show, this blackface minstrel show. So kind of shows what the mentality of the people at the time towards black people. And the whole concept of the suburban parish was really one of trying to get away from the city, trying to get away from those who were in the city, trying to get away from blacks and minorities, and try to move into this all-white situation. And Maureen speaks about that as attitudes of, kind of superiority. And the hierarchy kind of went along with that. And that's the thing that sort of shocked Maureen a little bit as she reflected on it. Why wasn't the hierarchy encouraging more integration, more reaching out to others, more inclusion of different people in the communities? The blacks in Catholic schools at this time were pretty much excluded as well. And the message about blacks from the church was there were no initiatives towards us. Whereas the reaching out to the blacks and trying to welcome them and make them feel part of the church. The FHA rules worked in such a way that the black people were pretty much excluded from those mortgages, and so they could not get the homes that white people could get. Levitt, in the way he built, put special covenants to exclude black people. And his thought was, well, white people don't want to live with black people. Let's keep them separate. Let's keep out the black people. But again, there was no outreach to the blacks. We'll just kind of leave them in the city and forget about them. Catholic affirmative action was pretty much non-existent. White supremacy was the order of the day. And as Maureen looks back at that, she says, well, what we have a need for here is affirmative redress. We need to take some action to redress this situation. In chapter 8, she gets into the idea of Catholic higher education, and she calls this chapter Doubting. And she starts with a student who raised the question in her class, well, do you really want to listen to the black experience? And I think that reflects the idea that many blacks feel, well, whites don't care, they don't really want to listen, they don't want to understand what we are going through. And there's sort of what she describes as a pedagogical imperialism. It's a certain way of learning and certain structures you have to follow, and there's no listening to those from another culture. There's a spatial obliviousness she speaks of, and the presumption of being ethical when we're not really ethical. She takes a look at the admissions policy, for example, of LaSalle and finds it lacking. She looks at the low rates of black students in Catholic colleges, lower graduation rates, and the effects really of college education in terms of helping people. That was not part of the black experience. she says that really different generations would help those along, and you don't have that in the Black experience. Uh, Social change is not effective. Even laws are passed, but there's no real effectiveness in terms of social change. She looks at Rosemont College, and basically it was the idea of slave owners in terms of the founding of the college. And she describes a slave-owning Catholic ecosystem. Nothing about us without us, and in terms of not really including people. In her epilogue, Undoing, she talks about the epiphany that she had, and that is the past and present colliding. There is a knot of apathy, there's a knot of separation. How do you undo that knot? We're separated from Black people. The separation was deliberate. The separation was intentional. It was structured in our laws. Black people couldn't get mortgages. They couldn't live in certain areas. They were excluded from Catholic schools, Catholic colleges. So there's this, separation that happened, and it's a big knot, in the knot of apathy. The knot of white Catholic missionary sensibility, becoming a co-conspirator with Black people and other people of color in changing oppressive structures and systems. So how do we take on this role as missionaries? I think it's an apt comparison. As missionaries went out and spread the gospel. So what we have to do in today's world, Marine states, is that we have to become those missionaries to undo these knots and to look at, well, what are the oppressive structures? What are the oppressive systems? And how can these be undone? How can we help remove those? There's the knot of self-preservation. That's a very difficult knot. People want to preserve their status. How do we break that knot? There's the knot of a lack of constructive conflict. And again, when you're dealing with conflict, a lot of people will shy away from it and say, well, I don't want to get involved with that. But you need a constructive conflict in order to better the system, in order to make it less oppressive, in order to make it more just. And the need, Maureen feels, is the knot of truly belonging to one another, that we are one people. There's the multicultural knots, the idea that, one culture is better than another. But when we bring all of the cultures together, we become richer. And we realize that we belong to one another, that we are one with one another. I would say in summary that Maureen has presented a strong case here for us to try to begin to undo some of those knots. It's not easy. Maureen doesn't say it's easy. It's difficult in terms of confronting our own past with regard to it and our own history. Our suggestion, start by taking a look at your own history and then gradually undo those knots and look at those structures that are oppressive and unjust and try to work as sort of a co-conspirator with Black brothers and sisters and those from other groups that are oppressed, Native Americans, those from Hispanic community, Asian community, work together to undo those knots.